Welcome to the Conoy Church Podcast. We're glad that you're interested in connecting through this teaching time. If you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out to us through our website, conoychurch.org. For now, enjoy this teaching from Conoy Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ.
Good morning. I'm in prayer with you all. If we haven't met yet, I'm Bryan Hoke, and I help to give leadership to an area of churches, of which this church is a vital part. So thanks for being a part of the family together. And I want to thank you for your generosity as well. I don't know if you know it, but you all have a wide impact. You certainly impact this area and Elizabethtown and the wider region. But even beyond that, through what we do together, you've helped plant a church in Allentown, which is expanding to a couple other spots. You've helped to plant a church in Lancaster City. Just a little bit ago, there was somebody who went from the Hershey Brethren in Christ Church, known as New Life Brethren in Christ, but you helped to send him to Spain. He is helping to do church planting in Spain. And then there's another couple that just in the last number of months went from the Harrisburg Brethren in Christ Church. So again, these are all churches right around you, and they are now serving in Greece. Greece has had an influx of immigrants from other nations where there were different things going on, and that's one of the places that people have been able to land, so to speak. And they are going there and serving, and that's just in the last number of months they were deployed. You, Conoy BIC, have a hand as we partner together in doing all of those things. So it's not just through your own lives and what Jesus is doing in you and how that expands to those people around you, but it is through your lives collectively as we come together that Jesus is doing that through all of us together. So thank you. It's good to be family together, to follow Jesus and then express his grace and love to all of those around us. Well, this morning I want to spend some time thinking about faith and doubt. And in particular, ask the question, is doubt a friend or foe? Now, none of us necessarily know what's going to happen tonight, tomorrow, the next day. And I didn't know what you all were experiencing when Nick asked me to preach, and then he said, hey, and it's wide open, preach on whatever. We were just in this series, and I believe you were going through Colossians at one point, but it's an open Sunday, and so I sent him in this kind of title of doubt, friend or foe, and also a passage from Hebrews 11. But I didn't know necessarily the circumstances that you all were going to be experiencing this morning, and yet I hope that potentially this is helpful this morning. So from the time that Agnes was a young girl, she believed in Jesus. She not just believed, but she wanted to do great things for God. She said, quote, I want to love Jesus as he has never been loved before. She knew Jesus was with her. She had this undeniable sense of him calling her. She wrote in her journal, quote, my soul at present is in perfect peace and joy. Wow. She experienced a union with God that was so deep and continual that she eventually left home, became a missionary, and gave everything to him. And then God left her. Well, that's at least how it felt to her, how she described it. She asked the question, where is my faith? She wondered. Even deep down, there just seemed to be this emptiness and darkness. And she said, my God, how painful is this unknown pain. I have no faith. She tried to pray. She said, I uttered the words of the community prayers and tried my utmost to get every word out of the sweetness, out of every word that it had to give. But my prayer of union with God is no longer there. And so I no longer pray. On the outside, she still worked. She still served, she still smiled, but she spoke of her smile as a mask, a cloak that covers everything. You see, the inner darkness, the inner dryness, and the pain over the absence of God, her believing there was this absence, continued year after year. And there was one brief respite for nearly 5 years, but this was the secret pain of Agnes. Maybe some of you have been there as well. You can look back in your past and you can relate to some of those feelings. Maybe even what you just heard brings out some of those types of experiences. You know, we have those experiences and they come knocking on our souls. And we think, is what I experienced, was that real? Did I ever actually experience it? Maybe I was just fooling myself then. Am I fooling myself now? Questions after question. And what ends up happening? Typically, doubt starts to grow in our lives. Yes, we have this faith, or maybe, but doubt starts to question faith or belief. Many would look at those types of circumstances and say, doubt runs contrary to faith. Like the two can't exist together because one tears at the other. It's an either or type of thing. If you experience doubt, well then clearly you can't have faith. And if you have faith, well then clearly you can't have any doubt, right? It's one or the other. In fact, it's opposites. My wife and I have 3 girls. They're all grown, essentially, now. But when they were younger, we used to read, those different types of books to them, those board books, the ones with flip-flaps up and down. Well, my oldest now has 2 children. They're in that young stage. So all of a sudden, those books that we stored in the basement for a while, they're coming back out, those board books. And one of those books was a Sesame Street book. And it was called The Book of Opposites. And so as you opened up the pages, it had those flip-up flaps. And you'd have like Elmo on the one side, and it would say short. And then you open it up, and there's Big Bird, and it would say tall. And so you get this back and forth, near, far, over, under. You get that, right? You get the pattern? For many of us, when we hear those stories of Agnes, we would say, yeah, faith and doubt can be on those same pages. There's faith on the page, you flip open the flap, and doubt is underneath it because they're opposites. And so we got to deal with that doubt. We got to get rid of all doubt. Because if you hold on to even a little bit, faith will not be able to develop. They're opposites. But is that the case? Is that really the way it works? That if you have any doubt whatsoever, or you experience something in your life and it causes you to question some things, then all of a sudden you've lost faith. Is that the way it works? Well, this morning we're going to dive into a little bit of that and ask the question, is doubt friend or foe? I want to look at the other side, not just focus on doubt, but I want to focus on faith just a little bit. And one of the early followers of Jesus wrote about faith, and actually summed up faith fairly succinctly. We're going to turn to the book of Hebrews. So if you're the type that likes to follow along, Hebrews 11, 1 through 3 is where we're going to start. Hebrews is a book in the New Testament of the Bible. Towards the back of it, if you hit Revelation, you went too far, come back to the left just a little bit, or turn on a phone. It's a little easier to find that way. But I'm going to read Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 3. Here's how it starts. Now faith, there's that word, faith, is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. Verse 3, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was made out of what was visible. What was not visible, Some have described this chapter, Hebrews chapter 11, as the Faith Hall of Fame. Because right after those verses, the author starts going back through the history of God's people and starts naming some major characters in the Bible and talks about what their experience of God was like and how that shows faith. So you have these great characters of the Bible, but it's interesting. It's not just the great characters of the Bible. In fact, there's numbers of ordinary people who are in that chapter as well. So ordinary that they're not even named. Just the circumstances of their life and their faith is highlighted. So all types of people, named and unnamed, are included in this Faith Hall of Fame. But the author begins by defining faith. What is it? Being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Another way I've heard that put is seeing the unseen. Think about that idea, though. To be certain, to have absolute confidence in something we actually can't see. Those two words, sure, certain, are mixed in with words like unseen, invisible. And there's this interplay back and forth, seen and unseen, visible and invisible. So you can't see it, but you're to act like you can. You know, it's kind of like in the movies, that you're watching a movie and you can just feel or sense something, or the character's there and you just know something's coming. You can't see it yet, but you know, next scene, eventually it's going to come out, but you just sense it. Or maybe you're in a crowded room and you feel like someone's watching you. Ever felt that way? Maybe this morning? Somebody's watching you, right? Well, if you're in the front row, yes, people are watching you. No. Or you get those senses and the hair on the back of your neck kind of stands up a little bit. But, you know, you can't see it. You can't know for absolute certainty. Is that it? Is that what faith is to be like? Yeah, maybe kind of, sort of. There's some elements to that in faith, but it's less about sensing or these weird vibes, and it's more about God. Interestingly, Mark Twain was quoted as saying that faith is this: trying to believe what you know ain't so. Trying to believe what you know ain't so. Well, the writer of the Bible points out it's more about believing something based on what we have come to know of God. And he goes on in verse 3, and he wants to illustrate this another way in the seen and unseen. And so he talks about God as creator and how God created everything out of nothing. So faith, this concept, is found in creation. We look around and we see all of this that's seen, the beautiful morning, the woods around us, and we understand that that was created out of nothing. And that faith has more to do with this created out of nothing, this invisible side that we can't see. And the writer's just saying, look around you, it's here, but we know that it was God, seeing the unseen. But that's challenging, isn't it? At least fights against my rational, logical mind, because everything I experience is based on what I can see, what I can feel, what I can touch. But is it really? I mean, many times we exercise faith, even in our daily lives. Maybe even this morning already, when you woke up, maybe numbers of you showered. At least if people are sitting next to you, you probably showered, you know. And you get in the shower and you look at this shiny thing on the wall and there's a nozzle there, and what do? You like turn it or you flip it or you do whatever it does. Why? Because you believe when you do that, water's going to come out of there. Well, how do you know? I mean, you don't know that water's going to come out. Well, how about this? All right, you get in your car, and if you don't have a push button anyhow, you stick a key in and you turn it, right? Why? Because you expect when you turn this little key in this little spot, the engine's going to fire right up, right? But you don't know that. In fact, have engine trouble, and 3 days in a row go out to your car and try to turn it, and nothing happens. By day 4, you're going to be praying, and you're not going to have a whole lot of knowledge that, if I just turn this, you're like, please, I got to get to work this morning. Please start. But every morning, you turn the nozzle, you believe that water's going to come out. You turn the key, you believe your car's going to start. It's Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m., you walk through these doors, you believe that Conoy BIC is going to be meeting here this morning, but you don't absolutely know that with certainty. Why? Because faith is all about thinking something will be the case, even though you don't have absolute certainty that it is the case. And in fact, we exercise faith all the time in our lives. Most of us did many times this morning just to get to this place. But when it comes to God, it can feel a little different, I think. Maybe harder to do so because of what's at stake. But the other question to this is, where would faith be without doubt? One more illustration for you. I have a $20 bill in my back pocket. How many of you believe me? Show of hands, how many of you believe me? Why? You didn't see, none of you saw me stick a $20 bill in my back pocket, right? Maybe I already did, right? So you start to reason and you say, oh, he could have done that before. When he didn't say a $100 bill or a $1,000 bill, maybe he's got 20 bucks in his back pocket. And you think, well, he's a pastor. He wouldn't lie in church, right? We don't want to see lightning strike right in the middle of church for lying. So clearly this guy would not lie to us, right? But you don't know, do you? And some of you didn't raise your hands. You're like, well, I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say, yes, he has $20 in his pocket. Those of you who raised your hands had to exercise faith that I did so. I am now going to kill your faith. You want to know how? I've just killed your faith. Why? Because I've erased all doubt. There is no doubt whatsoever that I had a $20 bill in my back pocket because I just took it out and I showed you. You have now seen it. You no longer need faith. Because you see, without doubt, it's actually impossible to have faith. Because when you know something for sure, 100% proof positive, then by definition, you can no longer have faith. Because faith is all about seeing the unseen. Having certainty about something which you actually can't have certainty about. For that to happen, there has to be an element of doubt. No more doubt equals no more faith. So then doubt is not the opposite of faith. It's actually an element of it. It's actually one of the basics of faith. Doubt is necessary. When it comes to faith, doubt is not necessarily a foe. In fact, it's a friend. It's not the enemy, it's a part of faith, which is what the writer of Hebrews says a little bit later is essential to a connection with God. Hebrews 11, verse 6, the very first part of it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. You see, the writer starts and he defines faith, and then he gives two examples of people. He gives that example of creation and then two examples of people. And then he says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. So while doubt and faith might all be part of the same equation, God desires that we land on the side of faith, that we lean towards faith, that in spite of doubt, in spite of not knowing something absolutely, we would start to see beyond that we would get past those doubts, get past what we can physically see and lean into certainty about something of which we can only hope. Why? Why is faith so key to God? Two reasons. There's probably more, but we're going to talk about two. Two basics of faith. It drives us to a deeper level. It drives to something deeper within us as people, the area that God is most concerned about. It drives to the heart, and it requires something foundational. When we can't know absolutely for sure, it requires trust. Two big things that God's concerned about: our hearts and trust. So if I was to tell you now, new subject, that there's a music stand in front of me, most of you would be able to answer your hands and say, yes, there's a music stand. Why? Because, you'd either register with your eyes or you hear me knocking on it and you register with your ears and something tells your brain, yep, foundational, it's there, we can see it. You don't need much else to come to that conclusion. You can just use your heads. But if I was to tell you the Holy Spirit of God is here in this room, he's all around us, he's right next to you, maybe for some, he's inside of you. Now I'm starting to get your attention. You're like, ooh, the freak show might have just started here at Conoy, right? You start swinging into high gear because why? You're like, where? I'm looking around. I can't actually see. I'm not able to register with my eyes or my ears, and so therefore my brain can't fully be the only thing it engages. You have to continue past your brain, and you have to get to other parts of who you are, and you have to engage your heart. And then you start thinking about people in your minds, and you're like, that person, I knew them like 10 years ago, and he was a jerk. And now all of a sudden, he's patient, and he's kind, and he's loving, and he's full of peace. How did that happen? Maybe this whole God thing is real, and maybe the Holy Spirit does actually work in people's lives and work to transform them. And so you don't know for sure, but you look at these traits, and you learn about the Holy Spirit, and it goes from your head to your heart, and you're like, wow, I can have faith. And that process requires trust as true. Too, another trait that God desires and is essential to faith. You see, faith is like a bridge. One never knows if it's going to hold you until you step onto it. You can read the signs, you can see the maximum weight limit, you can see how it's constructed, but you don't really know until you step out onto it. It requires trust. I trust it will hold me. Not the bridge, but faith. So I step. And that step is what faith is all about. And it's essential to connect with God. So as you all sit here this morning, and you think about this interplay of faith and doubt, where do you find yourselves leaning? As you process a connection with God, whether you already have one, or whether for the first time this morning, maybe even this morning you came here because you wanted to think about that and examine if it's even possible, if there's a God of the universe, and if that God actually loves you and me. Where are the places that doubt looms large and overrides any possibility of trust? Are there areas in your life, or maybe in mine, where we can identify that? Maybe it's in your past. Maybe it's something you're experiencing now. Maybe it's something you know is coming down the road. And thinking in those areas, is there any way that your head can get you closer to God? Because I don't believe faith means we check our minds at the door. I believe that God does use all of us, including our heads, to help us get closer and closer to him. But here's the thing about faith. Our heads will never get us close enough. They can help get us closer, but at some time, we're going to have to step. And we're going to have to see if that bridge of faith actually holds us. And in those moments, that doesn't mean we won't have doubt or we'll never have doubt again. But what it means is that faith, that trust, that seeing the unseen starts to overweigh those doubts to the point that we start to have certainty about something that we can't have 100% certainty about. Why? Because faith moves this idea of God from our heads to our hearts. It requires our hearts, and it requires trust. But understand, as we continue to or begin to follow Jesus, doubt will not disappear altogether, because faith has an element of doubt to it, apparently by design, so that it will push us beyond our heads. And through the struggles of doubting faith, maybe something will sink deep within us. And that's what Agnes found. You remember Agnes? The one who wondered where her faith was? She persisted in spite of those doubts. She lived with those doubts as a part of her faith. And through them, and through what she lived out, her faith actually deepened in many, many ways that may not have been possible if her life was just full of comfort and a lack of doubt. And through living that doubting faith in God, her life actually affected many millions. Maybe even some of you. Because later in her life, Agnes, this one with doubting faith, became better known as Mother Teresa. Let's pray together. Jesus, there are many reasons to doubt. And in fact, at times, our doubt can overwhelm us. And that's not what you desire. But at the same time, what you do desire, faith, in order for that truly to be a faith that pleases you, there's going to have to be some level of doubt. Because ultimately, what you're seeking is not a relationship just with our heads, but it's a relationship with our whole person, and it's a relationship with our hearts. And in order to connect with you at a heart level, there's going to have to be some doubt. We're going to have to be certain about something we can never be fully certain about. We're going to have to see the unseen. And so this morning, for each one of us, wherever we find ourselves with you, I pray that faith, that who you are, your love, would overwhelm doubt. And in the circumstances that arise, those this morning and those at other points in our lives, I pray that who you are would overwhelm not just our heads, but our hearts, and that we would step out on the bridge of faith in trust with you. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hi, this is Pastor Nick. Thanks for listening. I hope something that you heard today was very helpful. If you want to connect with us further, feel free to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, conoychurch.org. Sure, I'm glad we're in this together.